yes, 90% of the time I train on power or my zone 2 heart rates or whatever. But once in a while, you just got to put that data away and just go crazy. Maybe it's a climb. I like to do. There's a couple of good climbs around here that I'll do,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll take out the road bike and do a lot of VO2 work climbing because
Mm-hmm.
that creates a lot of torque and resistance on the pedals.
Hi, Coach Mike Ritchie here for the D3 Multisport Trust the Process podcast. And on this week's episode, I have Coach Jim Hallberg. Coach Jim is a 6-time national champion. He has coached multiple athletes to the USAT Olympic National Championships. He's coached athletes to Worlds, ITU Worlds at Olympic distance. He's coached athletes to 70.3 Worlds, Ironman Kona. The guy is a fantastic coach. He's an even more amazing person. And I hope you enjoy, this in-depth interview with Jim. Just an all-around wonderful human being, and just really, really enjoy this chat. And I'm sure you will too. Thanks. Hi, Coach Mike Ritchie here with D3 Multisport Podcast, and today I have Coach Jim Hallberg on with me. Jim is a 6-time national champion. He has been coaching for 20 years, cross country, triathlon, cycling, all of it. He's really renowned, and his coaches and his athletes all love him. They have nothing to say but good things about Jim. He always gets everybody to push a little bit further than they think they can. He gets a lot out of them. So welcome, Jim, and glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I was actually going to say it's Faster Masters. We came up with the Faster
Master. I love that even better. Yeah. These aren't nacho eating guys sitting on the couch, right? They're out there crushing it.
Well, and it's great because they're all age group guys, have the very business oriented, have families, very busy, but they make it work, and they get out and they follow the plan and they see the progression. And, even 50 years old, I've got athletes coming to me and say, I'm still PRing. So it's huge.
That's awesome. So all high achievers, right? Yeah. Every aspect of their life. That's awesome. So let's rewind a little bit. Let's just talk about, where you started with all this. I know you cycled a little bit in college, but you did some stuff even before college, right? You did some endurance sports stuff. So I know you grew up in Colorado, and let's just start there, like where you started kind of get I'm not going to call it an addiction, but the attraction to, endurance sports.
Yeah. I guess to kick it off, way back in the day, if you wanted to get around, you had to do it on your own, biking to a friend's house. And I had a job when I was 13, and it was 8 miles out to the golf course. And I was caddying all day, and you didn't carry bags, you ran the course. So it was a 7-mile course. You had to run the course, and then you biked home. And, it took me a few years to recognize that maybe that had something to do with, just creating a little bit of engine there. And I didn't start running until my junior year of high school. Started with track, and then they tucked me into cross country, and went to college, kind of walked on. I didn't think I'd be good enough to run. And I went to Fort Lewis College in Durango, and one of my roommates was in cross country. He's like, "Oh, come out and join us." And it was great. I'm so glad I did it because it changed my life. And he also said, "Hey, you need to do the local triathlon." And literally, I really didn't even know what a triathlon was. And
had you swum before, or did you know how to swim?
No,
huh?
No. I said, I don't know how to swim. And he said, "Learn." And I said, "Well, I don't really have a bike." He said, "Borrow." And it was great. So
it's learn, borrow, run, right?
What's that?
Learn, borrow, run.
Yeah. So I took this class, and the first day we did a timed 500. I'm not kidding you. I was basketball shorts, no goggles. I didn't even think about goggles. I think it took me 25 minutes to do a 500. And the Alaska state champion was 5 lanes over, and he did his in like 4.5 minutes or something. And so that was in January, and the first race was in April. And I just went every night to the pool. I'm like, I got to figure this out. I got to figure this out. And, our race was an 800. And I think at that time I did 11 or 12 minutes, which is a huge improvement from 25 for 500. So, and I did,
And how many weeks later was this?
April, May, June. So 4 months, 3 months.
Okay, that's a
Yeah.
good amount of time, sure.
And so I did the race, and I took second in the little local triathlon, and I was like, oh man, this is something that I felt like I could do after college, because as a runner, you can always do 5Ks, 10Ks, marathon. You can run the rest of your life, right? But this was a whole new element of something to do, and I felt like I was in college standards, I was maybe mediocre. You know, I was okay at Fort Lewis, but mediocre as a collegiate athlete.
Well, what kind of pace were you running for the 8K or the 10K?
Yeah, 520 pace
Yeah.
was about 515, 520 pace is about the best I was.
But this is at altitude as well, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But when you're running against CU and Adams and Western, and
Yeah.
these guys are running 450 for
Right,
10K.
right. You feel like you're out of the race right from the
Yeah,
get-go.
I'm in the back.
Yeah.
I'm just trying
Did you ever drop down to sea level during college and race?
No,
No,
we
you never traveled.
No,
Okay. Okay.
no. New Mexico, but that was 6,800 feet. If you
Yeah.
go to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was all.
When I was in college, our regionals, we raced in Western Pennsylvania. We raced Adams State came out to do the race.
Oh yeah.
And there were like 10 guys at the front of the race and they were just gone. Like you were just like, I guess that's the winning group.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a blessing that I didn't try to run it. They were our neighboring colleges on each side. And it was a blessing I didn't go try to run at those colleges, because I would have never been able to participate.
Right.
And so I went to a lower level college, and as far as cross country goes, and I'm glad I did, because I got to race every race,
Yeah.
and I had a good time and I learned a lot. But that's the start of the triathlon career. And then come to find out, my aunt was working for Mavic Wheels, and she was able to get me a Specialized bike. That was literally my first road bike after I borrowed in that race, and it just kicked it off. And I just just started training. I basically took what I knew from running, long days, interval days, these days, those days, and it applied it to all the other disciplines, and whatever. So I didn't know much, but I was learning along the way.
Okay, so you're 23, you're out of college, you're starting triathlon, starting your career, and then how old were you? I mean, obviously you knew you could be pretty good at this from even that first race you did. How old were you when you won your first national title? You were in your 30s, right?
Yeah. I remember. So Tim Hola was somebody that I always wanted to beat, because he was the local guy and he was winning a lot in Colorado. And I remember in my 20s, and I would tell everybody, no matter if you're 20s or 30s or 50s, I woke up and first thing I saw right off my bed was this list of it was kind of goals, but it like motivational. Like I remember one of the things on there says, who are they and why are they beating you? And that was that was the thing to get me out of bed at 5 a.m. to get to the pool. Because I don't know who they are, but they're beating me, and I got to figure this out. So it was just a lot of time of putting in the hours, and it didn't come all at once. It took forever. I felt like it took a decade, to finally start putting together. And I remember passing Tim Hola on the bike in 2009 at Boulder 70.3. And I'm like, oh man, this is game on, He ran me down. But after that, he didn't run me down so much. And it was a shift. And I was learning how to race at that level. And come to find out, it was my biking that really became my strength and something that I really started to pride my work on. So
nice. And then did you go pro for a brief bit there?
Yeah, it was. I was in a weird spot because I was
Age
racing.
group wise, because you're just doing well and wasn't a
Right.
lot of competition, right?
I was doing really well in Colorado. I'd even do some really high end races,
Hmm.
like elite races, age
Hmm.
group elite races elsewhere. And I was doing really well. And I thought, like, oh, I can, I should go pro because, like, if I had gone pro at a couple of the boulders, like the Boulder Peak races, I would have been in the money, stuff like that.
Yeah, sure.
And I did, and I'm like, nothing, my training didn't change. I couldn't really afford more hours. I was still stuck at 12 to 14 hours a week, and
Right.
at the pro level, there's such a
Double
great,
that. Yeah.
yeah, there's such a gray zone between like, hey, you're a really good age grouper and you're in the money,
Right.
There's so many pros out there that we don't even know about because they're not on the highlights, and
Right.
it's a real struggle. um, and I call up race directors and get homestays and
Hmm.
try to make it as cheap as possible. And that was actually kind of fun because I met a lot of people that way.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like it's kind of silly to go pro in that regards because I was not competitive at that highest level.
But you had now you had the experience of doing it, right? And knowing at least you tried it and said, okay, it was great at some points, but some points maybe the racing didn't pan out like you wanted to. And
Right.
it wasn't any fault of your own. Really, what I hear you saying is just, volume was a big issue because you weren't going to be able to train 25 to 30 hours a week.
Right.
And maybe your body wouldn't even be able to handle that, right? So
I would agree to that. I'm not saying that I
so
could do it.
right, right. So what year did you win your first national title at USAT Age Group Nationals?
To be honest, it was Myrtle Beach, 2010.
Okay.
It was like a long course. It was like the
Oh, nice.
7.3 version,
Yeah, yeah.
and I came in
But was
fourth.
it the international distance?
Yeah, well, it's like the 1.2 mile, 56, yeah,
Oh,
30.
okay, okay.
And so I came in fourth overall and won my age group. I was 30 to 34 in that group. Um, and then it took a few more years. And actually, I wasn't going to nationals very often. I hardly ever win. So then 2016, I went to Omaha because I'm like, oh, it's driving distance. Sure, why not? And I totally surprised myself and won the sprint and the Olympic that
Right,
year.
right.
And then the next year, I won the sprint in 17. And then we moved to Milwaukee, and then I won the Olympic in 2021 in Milwaukee, and then again in 2023 in Milwaukee. Um, yeah, and there's
Nice.
another sprint in there somewhere. I'm forgetting. Sorry. So
That's good. That's good. So do you think that, all these things that you learned, I mean, obviously starting out with, not much of a swim background, more of a run background, and then
right,
developing your bike.
right,
I mean, as a coach, you probably feel like that's a big selling point to your athletes. Like, look, excuse me, I've been there. My swim has sucked. My bike has been so, and it took me a while. And this is not there's no such thing as an overnight success, right? My overnight success, you could say this is a 10-year window, right? It took 10
right.
years to have my overnight success. So, do you feel like you can bring those attributes and that experience to your athletes? And are you able to convince them or persuade them, say, that, look, this is possible? It's just not going to happen in 6 months or maybe
Right.
not even in a year and a half. It's just going to take some time to put that in. And do you have athletes that they all buy into it? I mean, you feel like it's.
Yeah, and a lot of it is you go through that first year with an athlete, and I'm thinking a couple in individual, and there might be those initial bursts of gains, right?
Mhm.
Oh, we fixed the nutrition. Oh, I didn't know this was the bike power for a 70.3, whatever, and maybe it's pacing, whatever. So you might have initial gains on like one discipline or this asset of the game. But then the big picture stuff is like, yeah, to really get to the next level as an athlete, like, and be competing from, maybe you're going 5:30 and then trying to break five. Um, that and consistently being there, all the time. It's not a one-off. It does take time, and it does. It's not overnight, and you have to um, chip away at it. Like, I expect to make 5% gain in the swim, and
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5% in the bike, and 2 or 3 in the run, or whatever your strengths and weaknesses are, and just each one you're trying to make some improvements. And I saw, kind of like all traditional triathletes saw, is like your bike is going to make you the biggest gains most of the time, unless you totally fall apart on the run or whatever.
Right.
But you have to be proficient in the swim. You just have to be, so that you're getting out. You might not be the fastest swimmer, but you don't want to get to your bike totally waxed, So
Right.
and to then there now you can put out the effort on the bike.
Right.
And between new athletes and experienced athletes, that's the difference. Is experienced athletes can do all three, and it's not exhausting.
Right.
Where it's very tiring for those new athletes to do one sport and then the other and then the other.
Right. I've always said like it takes a certain level of fitness to be able to race, a 70.3, even an Olympic at some level, right? And 70.3, we could talk about this later, but I've always told people like when you're at 510, 515, it is a different ball game at 450, 445 because the nutrition changes. You're not out there as long.
Right.
You have more heartbeats you can put into the run, where that run, maybe to go 445, you've got to run 720s or 730s. And before you run an 8-minute pace, right? So it just, you can go from that aerobic 8-minute pace to like, yeah, I can hold that tempo for 90 minutes, 95 minutes, right? And I mean, obviously the end of a 70.3, if you're pushing hard, you're typically on fumes and
Yeah.
your legs hurt and you're needing more glycogen probably at that point and you're on that edge. And that's where you
Yeah.
kind of need to be to race at that level. But
Right.
everything changes as you get faster, right? I mean, it gets easier in some ways, but it's still the same amount of effort, right? I mean, it's the same kind of effort, right? So
Yeah.
do you have any, just going back to your own training, do you have any specific workouts that you like to do leading into nationals that are a good prep that you think, yeah, if I can hit these standards, I will be able to race that X effort, X speed?
Yeah. There's a workout we do here in Colorado, and I try to get other people to simulate it elsewhere in their own environment as well. But it's a bike run, bike run, bike run, and we do it back to back with about a 5-minute break in between. And so it's a bike, and you can modify the bike, but our loop is typically 5 miles
Mm-hmm.
with a 1 mile, or you can make it a mile and a half run. And we did that as well with a first 70.3 build up for Boulder, where it was a 20-minute bike and a 2 mile run. And we did that 3 times. When the thing is I have, obviously we train with power, we train with heart rate,
Mm-hmm.
but I sometimes throw that out the window, and I'm like, I'm going to go as hard as I can. I want to see what I can do. And I don't really care what the power is. I'm going to find out after and see where I'm at. And when you go bike run, bike run, bike run, it's on a Saturday morning and you're going as hard as you can, it really kind of tells you where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not pacing it. I literally want to find out at what point I'm going to fall apart, because that's going to tell me something.
Mm-hmm.
The third lap, I started fading about 5 minutes before the run. The power starts dropping off. My run, dropped off 20, 30 seconds per mile or whatever. I want to know that. I want to find out. I want to go hurt once in a while. So I think it's important that we do our workouts based on power. But I also think I'll do Strava segments that I've done over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's win factors or whatever, but I just go as fast as I possibly can for maybe a 15 or 20-minute Strava segment or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And those are motivating for me. Those part of racing fast is the belief and the confidence that you're ready to do that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and getting confidence to go into a race is like a big, especially a national championship race. And I'm not talking about ego where you're like, I'm going to win this thing, you know, because I think every time I've gone into a race thinking I'm going to win this, uh, karma has something, you know, or the world has something else for me. So I never assume anything, but I go in and I say, hey, you know I'm in pretty good shape. And if everything plays out well, I'll have a chance, you know?
Right. Right. Well,
So,
it's more in, you know, tell me I'm wrong, but it's more like you go out there and do the best you can in training to prepare yourself.
right,
And you're knowing on race day, you've done everything you can to prepare. You might have missed a workout. You might have had a bad workout, like you said, some paces drop off,
yeah,
but you're there like, I've done everything I can.
yeah,
If someone can match me, that's great. I mean, they're better than me on the day,
right,
but I'm going to give it my best effort and I will do
right.
everything I can to reach, you know, what I think I'm capable of.
Yeah. So back to your point, yes, 90% of the time I train on power or my zone two heart rates or whatever. But once in a while, you just got to put that data away and just go crazy. Maybe it's a climb. I like to do. There's a couple of good climbs around here that I'll do,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll take out the road bike and do a lot of VO2 work climbing because
Mm-hmm.
that creates a lot of torque and resistance on the pedals. Those are some good bike workouts that I like to do, and of course, getting off and doing, I don't do zone two bricks for myself because I'm not doing Ironman stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So every brick I do is my upcoming race pace,
Higher
right?
intensity. Yeah. So
Uh,
you mentioned zone two, and I know we've talked about this quite a bit over the years.
yeah,
How we've taken a certain philosophy of Friel, and you've definitely have, I would say, downgraded the range, right? Like you've lowered the range, and you've had great success with that. So let's talk about that, and maybe Steven Seiler a little bit, and what he has to say versus Joe, and just talk about that kind of a philosophy.
right. I've exactly right. I've cleaned a lot more, listening to Dr. Milan and
Hmm.
Dr. Seiler. I really like their approaches on everything. And so I went into Training Peaks and I put in my numbers and I just compared like everything based on lactate threshold. And I said, what are the zones for Friel and what are the zones for Kogan and what are the zones for this and my pro coach and what are the zones for, and it's insane, how many, um, how much
Different
variation
models are up, right?
in just a zone two for all these different models.
Huge variations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so based on Seiler and stuff, I just kind of piecing it down to what fits what I believe, what I think is the most effective. And basically, if you look at you know, what they found with the lactate, going from zone one, lactate turn points, um, your aerobic zone is about 80% of threshold or 70% of max, right? And that's kind of what I was going with, is like going with those numbers. And so I started biking and running like that, and I would a lot of my aerobic zones on the heart rate. Let's say I have a 155 bike heart rate, I would cap my zone two at 120. And um, what was fun is I would see that even if I wasn't doing a tremendous amount of intervals most over the winter, I would start out that 120 heart rate at like, you know, 215 watts and then 220 watts and then 225 watts and then 230 watts. So I know I'm getting stronger and
Right,
I'm not even using the same, it's the same heart rate. Same with running. Um, and it's just working on efficiency, right?
right, right.
And especially the running. And tell a lot of my athletes, finding a hilly course is nice. You get a good workout out of it, but also finding nice flat course, you can work on efficiency and work on like listening to your foot strikes, listening to your breathing, listening, feeling how your arms are moving and what little mechanical changes can you make to run faster and keep that heart rate down, so working on efficiency and I do the first year athletes, the ones that haven't made a full cycle with me, it's hard to see that in the very beginning. But the athletes that have kind of stayed with me over some time, we do this every year, and they've noticed 15 to 20 seconds per mile faster over maybe even less than 30 months,
Right.
just on some aerobic work, and being more efficient.
Yeah, most people will train too hard. I think that's probably a true statement.
And that's why I use the heart rate, is because if you go out and you're like, oh, you crush yourself at the track, or you do this really amazing workout on Tuesday, and then Wednesday it says, oh, zone 2, and you try to do zone 2 power, you're going to find that your heart rate is zone 3. So you're really working zone 3 the next day, and actually probably working too hard. So I use the heart rate because it's more of an accurate indicator of how hard your body's working.
Makes sense. It makes sense.
So
Yeah, I've seen the same thing with my athletes as well. And I'm probably still in the higher ranges, but I'm gonna give it a shot this winter, bringing it
yeah,
down a little bit. I'll probably get
and
some resistance, but
and
um,
with the run, because there is a lot more body involvement, I
mhm.
allow the heart rate to go to 85% threshold,
Yep,
for running, and 80% for biking.
yep,
And
that
that's
makes sense.
kind of
Yep.
how I coach my athletes. And for some, I'll be honest with you, the very, get out the door. I want to see a fast average, because if I start slow, it's going to really ruin my average pace. And I get that. I've been there, so it is takes a lot of patience to have that variability of like, hey, chill out today, because in a day or two, you'll be kind of itching and wanting to do some work, and you'll be able to really benefit and put out some good numbers and have a good quality workout because you weren't working so hard the other days.
Right. I mean, I think honestly, one of the hardest things to do is to ride a flat course on your bike in the aero bars, in the big ring, at that low heart rate, and just do that for hours. It takes discipline, ton of discipline.
Yeah,
Like if you can't do that by yourself, solo, without any kind of distraction, how are you going to do it on a race day with people flying by you? You're always going to be out of your zone, right? That's a great discipline lesson to learn how to do that.
right,
Just sit there, sit at the right cadence, sit at the right power, the right heart rate, and just drill it. Just
right,
stay there and create that discipline. That's a big one. I think a lot of people have a hard time with, right? Because they want to go fast, but you have to put the money in the bank to get the return on investment. And that's the money
right,
in the bank, is those long rides and long runs, obviously. And you're right. I mean, arm swing, foot strike, are you gauging your glutes? Are you leaning for your ankles? I mean, so many things we don't talk about with running, and it's so easy to pick up 3 to 5 seconds a mile. I always make this joke where I see people run down the street and I'm driving along and I'm like, I could give that guy 10 seconds a mile in about a 30-minute talk, right? Like it's so easy. It's so easy. So that's awesome. So so away from swim, bike, and run, do you? I know you're a certified strength coach. Do you implement a lot of strength training year round with your athletes? Do you just pick a specific period, or
yeah,
what? Give me 2 or 3 key exercises you might have people do to improve that strength.
yeah. So my philosophy, and I originally started as a strength coach back in like 23, and I really didn't stay in it, as a professional level.
Hmm.
So I'm sure there's tons of people know more. So my big thing is we work on large muscle groups. We go to the gym. We'll start with large muscle groups and work
Hmm.
our way to small muscle groups. And typically it starts off season, after your A race, and you've had a little bit of mental physical break, and then first thing we do is get to the gym. And I talk to a lot of people about like, hey, this is a time you prioritize it. Getting out for a run and doing this for a run or doing that for a bike is fine, but we need to prioritize the strength over the winter. So we do different cycles where, first it's a strength start. Like, let's just get into the range of motion, put on some lightweight, just get used to it because you're going to be sore. It's been a while. Get the mobility back, the range of motion. And then let's increase the weight, do some more reps there. And then we do like a hypertrophy phase, or like a 10-8-6 where, every set's getting lower. And then we'll get into our max phase, as we make a U-turn into the spring, where we're lifting as heavy as we reasonably can. As triathletes, to be honest, max is different for triathletes than it would be for a lifter. Right. I want them to lift really good sets, but we do want to run tomorrow, or we do want to bike or whatever. So it's all relative, right? I don't want anybody to get hurt, and that's the biggest thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, the number one rule of the gym is never get hurt in the gym.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's
So back it off. There's nothing to prove. But working, about 10, 15 years ago, I was doing this core class a couple times a week at the rec center, and we focus on the posterior chain because that is so much of everybody's weakness, right? We were doing we were doing calf raises and glute and hamstring activities and low back and everything. And that's all I was doing for like 10 years. And I got really strong just doing, body weight exercises with, dumbbells and, physio balls or whatever. And again, it was the posterior chain. And I was, granted, I was in my 30s and feeling well. But there's something to be said for that. And so when we do go to the gym, so many people, it's easy to activate the quads, right? Everything's out in front of us. That when I'm telling people to lift, like you want to be a whole leg, whole body encompassed, where you activate the quads and then it rotates. And as you go up in the lift, you're engaging the glutes. And a lot of people, I don't think they're firing their glutes. They're just not getting them engaged.
Right.
So, and that's if you want to get faster on the bike, your glute muscles are about the biggest muscles on your body, and very powerful. So part of that is like, if you want to be a more powerful runner, it comes from the glutes. So yes, lifting is very important, but having a focus on where our weaknesses are, and lifting with that neurological connection of like, when you lift, you're not just lifting, you're like, am I engaging? And really firing the muscles that you need to fire when you do that lift.
Right. So lifting with a purpose or intention to go in there. And so that's great. So this will bring me to my last question for you. We're talking about strength here, and we know, a lot of people think it's about speed, but as we get older, we know that running off the bike is all about strength. Running a 5-minute mile is great, right? But can you hold a 5:30 or a 5:40 for a 10K or a 5K off the bike or a 6-minute mile?
Right.
Usually our a pure 1 mile speed is way faster than what we can ever hold. And it's not a speed issue, right? It's a strength issue. Right. So do you feel like that strength training plays into the bricks where you see people all of a sudden, man, this guy is now holding a 7-minute pace where he was 7:20 last year after a good winter of training. Right. And those bricks are purposeful, right? Like you start seeing that, right?
Yeah. I for myself, I definitely see that when I get out of the spring, I'm batting really well. Like I'm ready to roll. And I haven't gotten a lot of volume in because it's winter in Colorado, and the only thing I've been doing is sitting on the trainer, and maybe once in a blue moon I can get outside. But man, I can go. And it's not because I'm doing a lot of work on the trainer. It's everything. It's like, I'm actually not doing a lot of volume. And I'm not doing a lot of like huge high and, like race intensity that you do, by the time you're in July and August, but I'm stronger.
Right.
And then
You're probably mentally fresh.
yeah. And then the other thing is as we go through the summer, we're like, well, I just did a big run or a big workout on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday is kind of a little more recovery, and then I'm going to be back on the track on Tuesday. And you're like,
Mhm.
it really comes down to like being disciplined enough to do at least the core workout and maybe a little bit of body activation, like I said, hamstring, glute engagements. But it's probably not likely you're going to be going to the gym because we, I tend to prioritize like I want to get that, brick in tomorrow or
Mhm.
the track work
Mhm.
in or whatever. So,
Right. Awesome. Okay, that was great. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about all these things. I think there's a lot of good takeaways here, and we are certainly going to have you on at another point. So
I'd love
thanks
to.
for joining us.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
All right.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Trust the Process. If you have a question on anything related to triathlon, please send me an email at mike@d3multisport.com. We'd love to hear from you. Make it a great day.